Royalty might wear the crown, but some monarchs seem to have completely lost their marbles. From emperors who made horses priests to kings executing toy soldiers, these rulers take madness to a whole new level. Let's dive into the bizarre behavior of history's most eccentric royals. Kicking things off with King Charles VI of France, also known as Charles the Mad. This guy wasn't just your typical royal with a bad temper. He had a full-on breakdown. Charles believed he was made of glass and took extra precautions not to shatter. I mean, can you imagine running a kingdom while avoiding all sharp corners and hugs? He had his clothes reinforced with iron rods to protect his fragile, imaginary glass bones, and his fits of madness included wandering the palace, howling like a wolf. Talk about extra. The worst part? France was already in trouble. His mental instability led to power struggles, and at one point, he was convinced he wasn't Charles at all, completely forgetting his identity. While Charles was busy protecting his glass bones, his court fell into disarray, eventually leading to internal chaos and foreign invasions. If anyone deserved a handle with care sign, it was this guy. Caligula, Rome's favorite party animal and quite possibly the most extra emperor of all time. From declaring war on Neptune, the god of the sea, he ordered his soldiers to stab the waves, to his obsession with his horse, Incitatus, Caligula knew how to make headlines. The emperor treated Incitatus better than most Roman citizens, feeding him gold-flecked oats and even appointing him priest. And if the Roman Senate hadn't intervened, the horse would have been a consul too. Caligula's list of accomplishments also includes turning his palace into a brothel, making public appearances dressed as a god, and having full-on conversations with the moon. His motto? Go big or go mad. Unfortunately for him, his antics didn't go over well with the Senate, and they ended his reign the old-fashioned way, by assassination. R.I.P. Caligula, but let's be real, you kind of had it coming. Now we have King Ludwig II of Bavaria, whose dream wasn't to rule, it was to live in a fairy tale. Known as the Fairy Tale King, Ludwig was obsessed with castles, building some of the most extravagant and iconic palaces in Europe. His favorite? The breathtaking Neuschwanstein Castle, which looks straight out of a Disney movie. In fact, it inspired Disney's Cinderella Castle. But there was one small problem. He was bankrupting Bavaria in the process. Ludwig preferred hiding out in his castles, away from his advisors, and living in a world of his own creation. He even commissioned extravagant operas from composer Richard Wagner, his idol. His obsession with fantasy over reality earned him the label of Mad King. Eventually, his advisors had enough, and he was declared insane and removed from power. But hey, at least he left us with some seriously stunning architecture. Next up, the princess who thought she swallowed a glass piano. Yes, you heard that right. Princess Alexandra of Bavaria was a unique soul, to say the least. She walked around carefully, terrified that her internal glass piano might shatter at any moment. Alexandra's belief in this bizarre condition lasted throughout her life, and she tiptoed through court with the utmost caution. Alexandra's delusion is one of the most peculiar recorded in history, and while she didn't rule, her story became famous for its sheer oddity. Her fragile sense of self and obsession with cleanliness made her stand out, even in a court filled with eccentric royals. Tsar Peter III of Russia had one major passion: toy soldiers. As if ruling Russia wasn't enough, Peter spent his days obsessing over his miniature army. He was so dedicated to his toys that he once ordered the execution of a soldier for desertion. Yes, a toy soldier. His fixation on military toys was just one of his bizarre behaviors. Peter wasn't exactly popular with the Russian elite. He admired Prussia, Russia's enemy at the time, and even forced his soldiers to adopt Prussian-style uniforms, alienating the military. His rule was so disastrous that his own wife, Catherine the Great, had him deposed in a coup. Spoiler, she did a much better job than he ever could. Poor King George III, known as the Mad King George. His nickname says it all. Suffering from what historians now believe was porphyria, George had manic episodes where he spoke non-stop for hours, rambled incoherently, and even talked to trees. He once wrote over 400 letters in 1 month during one of his episodes, much to the dismay of his government. George's reign saw the loss of the American colonies, but his mental health took center stage in the final years of his life. His son, George IV, had to take over as Prince Regent, marking the start of the Regency era. Despite his mental struggles, George III remains one of Britain's longest reigning monarchs. Finally, we have King Farouk of Egypt, the kleptomaniac king, known as the Thief of Cairo. Farouk had an uncontrollable habit of stealing everything, from expensive cars to Winston Churchill's pocket watch. He was obsessed with hoarding. His collection included hundreds of cars, jewels, and even a dagger he stole from a corpse. Farouk's bizarre behavior didn't end with theft. His extravagant lifestyle and mismanagement of Egypt's economy led to his overthrow in 1952. He fled to Europe with a fortune in stolen goods, proving that sometimes stealing can cost you a throne. Rounding out our list is King Frederick William I, whose obsession wasn't with wealth or women, it was tall soldiers. Frederick had a regiment known as the Potsdam Giants, made up of soldiers who were all over 6 feet tall. He would go to ridiculous lengths to recruit these men, even kidnapping tall peasants from neighboring countries. He didn't care much about actual warfare, just the visual spectacle of his giant army marching in formation. His reign was otherwise effective in strengthening Prussia, but let's be honest, he'll forever be remembered as the king who couldn't get enough of tall dudes in uniform. So there you have it, the royals who proved that sometimes absolute power comes with a side of absolute madness. From swallowing imaginary pianos to chatting with trees, these monarchs left their mark on history, even if it was a little cuckoo.